All right, here we go. Here we go. I can't believe that we get to do this today. Welcome to the Devoted Life podcast. The goal is just to have a conversation about what does it look like to live a life radically devoted to Jesus Christ, a life that in every respect turns towards Jesus. And today, we've kind of hinted at this, different episodes, but I just want to have a real conversation with two of my fitness heroes. So two of the great fitness heroes of my life, the one and only Kirk Garco and Mike Schnepp. And so Mike's been on a couple other times. Kurt, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Absolutely.
I've known both of you guys for a really long time, and I legitimately would say that both of you, for different reasons, are fitness heroes. And we're going to just talk about kind of the collision of like spiritual fitness, physical fitness, how being a person who takes care of your body is also something that has massive implications for your soul and for your spirit. And so, I know a lot of like, I'll tell a little story, right? So years ago, I sat down with a man, and it was actually at Denny's, and he was like, he was about, no joke, probably 500 pounds. And he was if I said his name, you'd probably know him. Yeah. He was, because he went to Cornerstone Church back in the day to preach. He was from South Africa, and he was like a Christian legend. Like he had seen every miracle you could ever see. He was like just this amazing man of God. And I remember when I went to Denny's, and he was obese. He was eating like 3 meals and just, like devouring food, was not caring for his body. And I remember I tried to like ask him questions about his spiritual life, because he was such a spiritual giant, literally like prayed for a guy to be raised from the dead, like all this crazy stuff. And anyways, I was just so like drawn to the contrast of like, you are very undisciplined physically and yet ultra disciplined spiritually. And he died like 2 years later of a heart attack. Wow. In his early 50s. Yeah, it was terrible. And of course, we know that there are tragedies, there are things you can't avoid. I think in that instance, it was actually something he could have avoided, And so not everyone is going to be Kirk Garco and back squat 12,000 pounds, but we all can grow in the care of our body. And there are huge implications, we'll get into this, for your spirit, for your spiritual life as well. So this has been a slow one for me. I was not, I'm naturally, ultra athletic. Yeah, I was always elite, but no, in my 20s and 30s, I played in a rock and roll Jesus band and did not have any discipline when it came to eating or, thinking about my routines. And so it wasn't until my 30s, when I was about 25 pounds overweight and slow, and the physical strain of ministry was starting to cause me to shut down, that I started to I started to go to your gym, Kurt. This is back when you were leading a gym, and you would, while I was there huffing and puffing, you would walk over and say, "Hey, that bar doesn't pick up itself, And hey, and you were very encouraging.
One of the famous quotes.
You were very encouraging. Yes.
Famous quotes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to get done sooner, go faster. Like Kurt had a lot of really helpful kind of encouragements through the years. But Kurt, I'll start with you. Like, how did you? I know your family is like all elite athletes. So if you know the Garceaus, they're better than you at every sport. All right, and so that's the fact. But how did you get into fitness yourself? Like, as you look at your kind of journey, obviously I know sports is a big part of it. But give us a little story.
Yeah, it's honestly a pretty good question. So fitness has always been a part of our life, kind of like what you mentioned. It kind of goes hand in hand with sports.
Right.
If you want to be an elite level athlete, you have to figure out how to put yourself and separate yourself from other people.
Right.
So, fitness, nutrition,
right,
all those things fall under the realm of being an athlete. Well,
did your parents do that? Like, were your parents like, obviously they were pretty athletic, I think, both Tommy and your dad, right?
I think it's a little different, because I think I learned work ethic from them, and the work ethic transferred into sports. Because if you just continue to work hard, because that's what I saw growing up, I just felt like you'd be better than everybody else.
Yep.
So going into the fitness world, after playing college lacrosse, I realized what's next. What is after college, because, again, you could play men's league, you can do all that, but what is that competition side of thing? What is that thing that's really going to make my fire start to burn inside me in terms of the fitness world? So I tried a bunch of different things, and I ended up landing into CrossFit, and I had no idea what CrossFit was. I thought group classes were, who goes to group classes? Right. The only people I know that do that are Zumba people. So I went to this class, and I really fell in love with it. I fell in love with it for two reasons. Number one, because it pushed me. It pushed me beyond the realm of just squatting or benching. It pushed me because I knew there were things that I were not good at. And I really wanted to get better. So there was that side of thing. And the other side is you can compete into this sport. And I said, man, these two things hand in hand will push me. And with that, I fell in love with learning everything there is to do about fitness, how to lift, technique. And I really enjoyed that process. And I was in CrossFit. And again, CrossFit is for people and it's not for people. I just fell in love with the process of learning all these intricate movements. I mean, Olympic lifting is hard.
It's hard.
It's Olympics. It's in the Olympics. So, to learn all the
so is badminton.
I was about to say, there's a few other, does that really count? There's a few other games that are like, what?
You're not wrong. But I really, really kind of fell in love with it. And that's what kind of kicked off my fitness journey. And throughout the course of that, I fell in love with helping other people in that journey as well. So,
well, before we go to Mike, so one thing I learned right away, and I think your journey is really different, right? Because Mike was running 100-mile races while Kurt was like,
nowhere near
like
as
Jillian.
hard as back squatting.
I know, right. Yeah, no, it's true. But one thing, obviously, the sauce for you with your gym, with a lot of the fitness stuff you did, you're competing, but you were also like creating incredible community, right? And so like there is this piece of like doing it together. And when I showed up, this is whatever 7 years ago or whatever it was now, at your gym, early on, like I was the furthest thing from a CrossFit athlete. I was like a basketball player that retired at age 18 that was now 31 or whatever. And but like having fun with like other people that were all over the place. Some, there was always like that 90-year-old lady that I would beat, and then like everyone else would beat me. And so, but the community aspect was a big piece of it. You're pretty intentional around that. I think fitness with people is a big piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. When you talk about community, CrossFit is a beautiful model for that, because you look around the room and you'll have an Olympian, and we had a couple Olympians show up, but you also have your 90-year-old woman. You also have some kids who really never have done anything before. And the intensity and the weights may differ from person to person, but the community is there. So that Olympian may be going heavier and harder and a little bit more extreme than, say, I'll use my Uncle Jer as he's always crushing it there. He's always crushing it. But the intensity differs. But you look and you see that guy and you see this woman, and then, they all finish at the same time. And it's not only that, it's the fact that the fist bumps and the high fives and the you got this, and knowing the people that you're around, that's what creates the atmosphere, and that's what creates that community aspect that you really can't get unless you're a part of a team, and because you're all working together for the same exact goal. You all want to accomplish the same thing. You're there to be fit, but at the same time, you're doing it together.
Yeah, and I mean,
I'm enjoying CrossFit.
Yeah, I know, right?
Salesman.
Yeah, well, none of us go anymore, but it's all right. But like one thing, I know for me, this is like 101, but I didn't really know this. Lead pastor of a church since I was 28 years old. Was in ministry before that, from the time I got out of college. The pressure and the stress of a growing church, multiple locations, the complexity of our ministry, blah 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 blah. The stress levels were hot, and for me, like, I remember going to your Tuesday class after a brutal Tuesday. Tuesdays at Vox Church are always like the jungle around here, right? I had, 19 straight meetings like an idiot. And I would go to your class, and by the time I got out, like, I didn't know what day it was. I didn't know where I was. There were days where,
Kurt was programming to kill.
Kurt was programming murder. Yeah, no, legit.
Trying to get everyone in the Olympics.
We were all on the ground in a puddle, like, where am I? What day is it? And then I felt so much better because I couldn't remember my problem from 2 p.m. either, you know, and I learned like 101 of like athletics, like, you know, moving your body moves your mind too. You know, there's a huge connection between a sound mind and a healthy body. And so for me, you know, that was like, it's obvious to a lot of people, but I was a late bloomer in realizing that. Mike Schnepp, you know, when I first met you, you were wearing khaki pants and you were a little thick, and then you started running. Obviously, not running so much anymore. Now it's all about the powerlifting. But let's go back in time to Skinny Mike, and you were. How'd you get into running? Like, how did that? You were an athlete, sort of, right? I'm just kidding. No, Mike's like, all right. If you don't know Mike's story, he's like a super athlete. So.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Yeah, super athlete.
No, not at all. My story is very similar to Kurt. I'll be brief, but yeah, played sports all growing up. Played college soccer. Got out of college and was like, now what?
Yeah,
you know, athletics and sports have been such a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, fell into running. Love setting goals. So I was like, let me try.
But you didn't run right away though, right? Like you had a season where you're starting to kind of get overweight and slow down.
Yeah, it just didn't. Yeah, it's like, well, I don't have team sports. I don't know anything else, and so now you're like working a job, not doing anything, eating the same. Yeah, and all of a sudden you go, huh? Things aren't moving the same way.
Yeah.
So fell into running, and yeah.
How old were you at that point?
I was probably 25.
When did you get like the idea, hey, maybe I'll run 100 miles?
So
that's kind of a stupid idea.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It was a stupid idea. So just got into running, and right around then was when they started being able to track your distance. So it was like, I'll go for a 5-mile run. Let me see if I can do 6 tomorrow. And the running world is based on distances. So it's like, let me do a half marathon. All right, let me move up to a full marathon.
Yep.
And then it was just, let me move up to a 50K.
Well, hold on. So that's an interesting moment because 99.9% of the human race doesn't run a marathon.
Yep.
But then there are those that go, I'm going to be dumb enough, right, Maddie, to run a marathon. And then congratulations, you were dumb enough to run a marathon. You're part of that tiny percentage. Then there are those who think, no, let's run another 80 miles. So how did that come into your head? Why would you do that?
I fell in love with trail running. So it was the merging of like love being in the woods, love nature, and running. Put those two things together, found trail running, and got obsessed with it. And trail running just naturally leads to ultra running. Yeah. So, you know, several hours, several days in the woods, whatever. Yeah.
So why? Like, what was that? So you've done obviously multiple, 20 something ultras or some crazy stupid number. Like there's something wrong with you. But what led to like that experience? You're out there for 20 hours or whatever it is. What is that like? You don't have headphones in, do you? Like, what does that look like?
It's different every time. Depends on the race and where you'd be. Some are in the mountains, some are in the deserts. You know, we went to the Alps for a race. We'd go out west to races, and we got to see the world, which is awesome.
Yeah, that is cool.
There was ultra running has this real like suffering element to it, which I felt was a real correlation to like day-to-day life. Like just learning to grind and endure and not give up, and even when it's hard. And really, honestly, like spending time alone in the woods was very worshipful.
Yep.
You know, just like your spirit and just connecting with the Lord, which was great. And then just that discipline, like we talk about with sports, the discipline of your physical life has just such direct carryover to the discipline in the rest of your life.
Do you remember the guy at your gym who was like a military guy? He would always like wear like green. He was kind of taller, dark hair.
Yep.
I don't know. You probably know his name. It's fine. You don't have to blow him up here. But like, I remember like meeting him and you telling me about him. And like, we had this conversation about how like, your body can do exponentially more than your mind thinks. And you know, at that point I was like, you know, I think I went like up 30 pounds in my bench press in like the next 4 weeks. And it never really got very good, but
from
like
80.
Yeah, shut up, Richard.
110.
Yeah. Pretty soon I was up to what, like 450 or something like that. And and you know, but the shift in my mind, I remember talking to him, talking to you, and he was like all about that. And he would talk about like the suffering, you know, that like suffering in exercise is a training for endurance and suffering in life. What do you know about that, Kurt?
So I'll start off by telling the same story that I tell a lot of people. Your mind has a tendency to play tricks on you. You take the 4-minute mile, for instance.
Right.
How long did it take people to actually crack the 4-minute mile?
Right.
And then I believe, I forget offhand, but I think it was 1 week or 1 month.
Yeah, very shortly after.
Shortly after the first guy did it, the next guy did it.
Right.
So you
now they do it in college practices.
It's incredible. So once you place something in your mind that it's achievable, and again, I don't want to sound too coachy, but if you believe and you believe and you believe and it's achievable.
Yeah.
And again, when
your body catches up.
Your body catches up. And so that's what I tell all these people that I used to train, whether it's losing weight, whether it's lifting weights, whatever your goals are, you have to be able to concentrate on your goals. But again, it's not just believing. You have to put in the effort and you have to put in the practice and you have to make some sort of change in order to achieve it. But at the same time, you have to manifest it in your mind.
Right.
And you have to believe that you can.
Yeah.
And that's half the battle.
Yeah.
If you do believe it, I mean, the rest is just implementation.
Well, and, at least what I've found, and I never ran 100 miles or competed in the CrossFit Games, but, for what I've done, which is like run a 5K, but, like for,
just as good.
in my experiences,
they're the same.
Yeah, they're pretty much the same. In my experiences, though, I've seen a lot of transfer, that every time I develop endurance or grit in my physical body, I can actually move that over to prayer, to trusting God during loss or hardship, to enduring through difficult times in my marriage. That there is muscle memory, for lack of a better term. And I think this is where a lot of believers struggle, because you're not physically disciplined. And then as soon as something bad happens, you're falling apart, and so, or there are some guys I know who are like your muscle heads, and yet as soon as things get tough in your marriage, you want to quit. And it's like, you gotta transfer, you gotta use that same endurance, skill spiritually that you use physically. Have you found that those disciplines transfer?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I was talking about a second ago, which is like, you learn that in sports, and then you realize, like, sports teaches you that when things are hard, you can press through and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
And then that is such a direct transfer to life.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and Paul talks about with Timothy, he says that physical discipline is of some value, godliness is of value for eternity. And so, like, sometimes I think one of the best ways to get spiritually disciplined is to get physically disciplined, where you actually begin a physical discipline, which will be of some value. But those are like the training wheels for, hey, if I can stay in the gym a little longer, if I can show up 4 days a week and actually put in an hour every time, now I can endure hardships with my kid. I can trust God through cancer. I can, again, so you have to even see your physical training, not just as let me look shredded, for Instagram. That's not the Christian goal. The Christian goal is let me use every available tool for God's glory and for his purpose, and to become more like Christ. And I think that, the physical discipline, at least that for me, I found they're connected. I would not just say they're connected. I would also say, and I want you guys to talk about this, stress, right? So mental, emotional stress. We all have kids. We all have a single wife, each of us one single wife. I don't want to say wives, right? We all have one single wife, which is more than enough. And we live full lives. And so stress is just real. Stress with your parents, stress with a loss, stress with loved ones, etc. Stress with work. So how has physical fitness and your disciplines in your physical fitness and stress, how do those two worlds collide in your lives?
Well, it's a good question. I use the term in the gym often, try to get 1% better every single day.
I've heard that.
And
from you.
So that 1% better. And again, this kind of goes throughout everything that you're talking about. That 1%, you don't need to make drastic changes in your life. You don't need to go from here. And some people can.
Yep.
Some people can go cold turkey on anything.
Yep.
But to manage stress, just because you have stress today, it's not going to go away tomorrow.
Right.
So how do I get
Huge.
1% better every single day? What are things that I'm implementing? And from the gym, I say the same thing. You want to run a mile? All right, well, you're not going to go out and run a mile today if you've never ran before.
Right.
So how do we start?
Yep.
Same thing, with our faith.
Yep.
You're not going to go out and start reading an hour's worth of the Bible every single day.
Sure.
Things need to click and things need to work.
Yep.
So it's so relatable in terms of the disciplines that you set in your life.
Yep.
And the same thing in your faith.
Yep.
1% better every single day.
Yeah.
How do I manage that stress?
Wow.
Okay, well, let's figure out the situation. Let's go from there.
Yep.
All right, let's tackle it a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
It's not, like I said, it's not going to go away tomorrow, but how do I make it a little bit better tomorrow?
That's really good. I think a lot of Christians, we fall into that mindset that's like, well, I prayed. Why am I still stressed?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, it's not like, well, I went to the gym once. Why didn't I lose 30 pounds? And it's like, well, that's not really how it works.
Yeah.
It's the progressive, cumulative effects of good choices that does lower stress. How about you, Mike? When you think about stress, you think about exercise. What's that world been like for you?
I think me, you, and CK did a podcast on stress, and I think the
Yes.
key word is
Yeah.
manage stress.
Right.
So it's actually part of your management protocol.
Right.
Like I have a physical way to approach it, I have a spiritual way to approach it, I have an emotional way to approach it,
Right.
and all of these things together are my approach to managing stress. And everyone knows how good physical exertion is for your mental state, whether it's like the chemicals or whatever, and all the just the detachment and the hobby and the enjoying things. It's all a part of that process of keeping yourself lower.
Yeah. I know that a lot of people don't have this issue. I'll speak for myself because I do have this issue. Detachment's a really big deal for me. And it's something that, I'm learning again. I feel like I've been in a journey, but I'm such a focused person. I'm so dialed in. I'm so driven, and I'm high vision, right? So like I don't, I'm not looking a year out. I'm looking 20 years out, and I see it already. And I know where I feel like God's called us to go. And that's a gift. Thank you, Lord. That's my strength. The problem is, literally for 20 years of my leadership life, I've had other leaders go to me and say, hey, like, what do you do for hobbies? And I'm like, hobbies are for the weak. You know what I mean? And like I wouldn't say it out loud, but that's basically what I thought, and now here I am 42. I'm like, I've got some hobbies now, like I'm committing myself to hobbies because the detachment is so key to a healthy mind. That like if I'm always locked in, if I'm always dialed in, the body doesn't have opportunity to restore. And I also think, just speaking plainly, and I want to talk about diet in a second, but I think part of my problem too was because I'm always so locked in, I don't leave space for celebration. And this is a really big mistake, especially for New Englanders listening to this podcast, right? Where we're all drive and climb the corporate ladder, get the success. Your kid has to be a superstar, whatever, all these things that we put pressure on ourselves for. But we don't really create that space to actually just enjoy life, and I think both of you guys actually do a good job enjoying life. I have some things to learn, but I want to talk about, and you can go back to that as well, but I want to talk about diet, because, you're pretty dialed in, both of you, and, Mike, I'll start with you this time, but you fluctuate, right? Like you put on weight, like when you started lifting. So Mike went from skinny
killed.
No, yeah. So Mike went from like skinny runner to like swole fest in like a day, and everybody's like, Mike's juicing, right? Like Mike is doing drugs, right? Yeah. But like it's not that you were, I mean, a little bit of, steroids on the side, but no, I'm just kidding.
They don't hurt.
Yeah. It's not that you were doing drugs, but it's that you are so freakish about your diet. It's your can of chicken we all smell all day. Mm-hmm. Like that, you set a goal, and whether it's cut so that you can, be a runner, or bulk so that you can focus on lifting, you're like pretty intense about just what you eat. So how does that connect with health and stress for you?
I remember I was taking voice lessons. I lost my voice like 20 years ago, back when I was a worship leader. And I had a vocal coach who was a CrossFit coach.
Yeah.
And
there you go.
They said to me, you can't outrun a bad diet. And you could speak to this much more than I could, but so much of what you want to see physically, it's not actually what you do in the gym. It's what you do the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And so if that's not dialed in, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you think about diet, I think ultimately everybody wants to be the best versions of themselves.
Right.
And I think that's the ultimate goal. People, they want to be skinny, they want to be fit,
right.
But no one, I don't think predominantly people walk around and say, you want to know what? I just want to feel slow and sluggish today.
Right.
No, they want to feel the best versions of themselves. Yep. So in terms of diet and how to manage that, well, we live in a world where it's virtually impossible to be perfect in terms of your diet.
Right.
There's so many, different things, so many birthday
travel,
parties, so
restaurants,
many holidays,
birthday parties,
all sorts of stuff. So, how do you manage that in perspective of life? Well, I think, number one, you have to be able to set boundaries. You have to be able to commit to what it is your goals are.
Right.
All right. If your goals are, I want to be fit.
Right.
All right. Well, you're going to have to be 85-15, 80-20 in terms of diet.
Yep.
Well, if you just want to live life and see what happens, well, all right, then you're going to be more 60%, I'm going to eat whatever I want, 40%, it's a Wednesday afternoon, maybe I'll have a salad.
Yes.
So, the stress that you put on yourself, I think it ultimately comes down to what is it that I'm trying to accomplish?
Right.
And this carries over to every aspect of life.
Yep.
And again, you can go back to faith, you can go back to how you raise your kids, you can go back to anything.
Yep.
What are you trying to accomplish? You talk about being a visionary.
Right.
All right, what does the next year look like in terms of my diet?
Yeah.
All right. If I start now, I'm not going to start, at the end of May and hopefully by June 2nd, I'm ready to go for vacation.
Right.
No, January, I have to get myself locked in, dialed in, have a game plan, and figure out what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I know this is a Christian podcast, but it carries over to faith.
Yep.
What does the year look like for me? What am I going to try to accomplish? How am I going to carry what I'm learning, what I'm doing over to how I'm living my life?
Yeah, it's good.
And, I think if you're disciplined in one area, it's much easier to be disciplined in all areas.
Yeah, I think Kurt has a good point here in that the goal of all of this is not, like you said,
right,
Instagram.
The cover of a magazine.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, God's given me one life. He's entrusted me with a call. And the way I handle my body directly impacts the way I handle and steward that call.
Yeah.
So like, I want to be around for a long time and see my grandkids. Well, I got to make some decisions now to live healthy so I can be around for a long time.
That's the biggest thing. You think about these dads, and again, this is what I think about. I don't want to be the dad that struggles to play with my grandkids outside.
Right.
That is what I'm trying.
Good.
I don't want to have to pump my arms and swing myself out of a deep couch to stand up.
Right.
These are things that I think about. How do I prevent that from happening? How do I work my way up to make sure that I can go out for a 3-mile hike with my grandkids?
Yep.
How do I spend an entire day at Disney?
Right.
Not
collapse.
Yeah, and not collapse
when
I'm
nothing you can prevent that from.
There's maybe nothing you can do for that one. Sure.
Yeah, but like these are the things that I don't. You want to be fit. You want to look great. For yourself and for your wife.
What do you always say? Look good, feel good.
You look good, feel good, play good.
Yeah.
Sanders.
So but again, that's what life is about. It's what am I doing to set myself up to where I want to be?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's just say that you're, listening to this and you're 32, you're a guy, you're single, you've got a couple extra pounds on, you don't feel great. Or let's say you're 41, you just had, your kid's 3 years old or whatever, and you're trying to keep up with the chaos of life, and you're like watching those like do push-up videos from YouTube in your kitchen, like what are some like first steps that people can make, men, women, whatever, when it comes to, all right, I'm a follower of Jesus, but I want to get more disciplined or more intentional around my health physically, whether it's, exercise and diet, like a couple of baby steps. What would you do if you were talking with a friend and they said, man, I've not really been intentional. What should I do? What pops in your head?
This is your world. Only thing I'll say is just find something you like.
All right, let's talk about that. Yeah. So what did you try? Like, how did that work for you?
Tried it all. Tried running, tried cycling. Now I'm doing lifting, but whether it's CrossFit or yoga or whatever, find an exercise routine that you're going to stick with.
Yeah.
Because if you hate it, you're not going to do it long term.
Yep. What if you hate them all? Because I hate them all. Yeah. No, I mean, I've learned to enjoy them, but it's really just degrees of hate.
Yeah.
Like I don't have any that I'm like, oh, I love doing this. And I can say over the last 5 to 7 years, there's been a conversion where now I do. It's like a learned taste. But like I guess is the advice, if you hate them all, just pick the least hated one. Because that's what I've done.
Tell us, Coach.
I mean, that's a valid question because a lot of people, I don't like walking, I don't like running, I don't like doing anything. Well, at that point, you're going to have to pick something.
Right. Pick it and find people you like. That's what I did. It's find people I like, and that was better.
Do it with a community of people that will make sure, hey, we're going 4 o'clock.
Totally.
You
can enjoy the people even if you don't really enjoy. Like when I started CrossFit, no offense, Senor CrossFit, but I mean, you've kind of abandoned some of your CrossFit tendencies, but I didn't like CrossFit at all. But I liked my wife who went, and I liked you, and I liked Miguel, and I liked a bunch of the guys that were there. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go see the guys, you know, and Ryan was there and Joey was there. And so I was like, I'll just go because I like them. And I think for me, you know, because I couldn't find, I tried before that. I tried running, I tried biking, I tried rowing, I tried everything. And it was like, I hate all these things. And yeah. And then I stuck because relationship, you know, so that's a big one for me. What are the thoughts on that?
So I think the biggest thing is to have a goal. And it sounds, again, cliche, but having a goal, and I'm not talking, you know, if you feel like you're 15 pounds overweight, it's not, I want to lose 15 pounds. That's not specific enough. So you need to start having manageable goals, tangible goals that you can reach and you can accomplish. And guess what? When you hit that, you can move on to the next step. So if you're not a runner, and we'll just use marathon because, you know, you're a guy, and if you want to say run a marathon. Well, what are some tangible goals? Well, let's start and see if we can run 5 miles. All right. Once we run 5 miles, I can check that off the box, but now I have about 3-4 other goals where I can start accomplishing those things. So in the fitness realm, and in order to get yourself into that position, all right, well, maybe I want to hit the goal. I want to go to the gym 4 times a week. All right, 4 times a week for 4 months, and we're going to see what happens. I mean, little goals like that you can tap yourself on the shoulder. And I do this in a micro aspect during my workouts. Let's just say, for instance, we have 100 wall balls. All right, in the back of my head, I said, all right, that's 4 sets of 25. Boom. All right, that's a goal.
4 sets. I'm not putting that ball down until I hit 25.
It's not even that. I get to 5, and I'm like, all right, you know, I'm this percentage, I'm 5% there, I'm 10% there. And every single time I can make that check, it's a little pat on the shoulder in the middle of your workout.
Bite size.
So you put that on a bigger scale. Every time that you can give yourself a pat on the shoulder, that's another check mark to make yourself feel a little bit better.
I like that.
And when you transfer that to any of your goals, every single time you accomplish something, you feel good. You feel like, man, that was on my list and I just did it. So don't just go to the end and say, I'm going to run a marathon. No, put about 6 to 12 little minor goals in
mile
there,
markers,
so that when you accomplish them, it's like, oh, I'm getting there.
That's good. Did you play that game when you're running 100 miles? Are you going, all right, I'm on mile 12. That means I'm 80%. Like,
it's the aid station. That's how you run the longs.
Aid station.
Every like 10 miles, there's like a tent you show up and there's food and drink. And
so you're always thinking about the next aid station.
How many miles to the next aid station? That's it. You play that game the entire time.
And you do it 10 times.
We call those survival stations.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. 10 stations, not so bad, right?
Do 10 of these.
Play the game. And again, this goes back to that whole idea, and we'll close with this today. Your mind is your barrier, right? And by the way, this is where I really wanted to land the plane, because this is the key to spiritual disciplines as well. When it comes to prayer, Justin, I can't pray for an hour. Your mind is the barrier. When it comes to reading the scripture, I can't understand this book. Your mind is the barrier. You can't, and Kurt, you said this really well, like, you can't begin to do these things until you believe that you can do these things. And the truth is that it's not that you don't have the capacity, it's that you don't believe that you have the capacity. And so I just want to encourage you, as you kind of think about this podcast, you've heard 3 guys talking about fitness. There's so many other directions we could have gone. I want to encourage you, are there 1 to 3 takeaways for your life as you look at your life? Like, hey, I am going to start tracking what I eat. And I'm going to, XYZ. I'm going to use an RP app or some other app, and I'm going to begin to adjust my diet, or I'm going to show up 3 times a week with a community of people that are going to do whatever, running, cycling, CrossFit, whatever it might be. What are the next little steps that you can start to make to make your life better and to actually cultivate that physical discipline that feeds the spiritual discipline over the long haul? So, hey guys, thanks so much. Being a part of a devoted life is really about holistically looking at my life and saying, it's all for you, Jesus. Let me use it for your glory. So I appreciate your guys' input. Hey, if this was helpful, share it, get the word out about it. But good to just have some time to talk about this.